finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Welcome back, everybody. Super excited to bring you a really interesting show today. Ties in with our theme. We've been talking about diet, alternative health options, and our guest today is Dr. Micah Yu. He is a rheumatologist as well as, he's been a patient of rheumatology, which is a really interesting path that got him to where he is today, but he also has a huge interest in holistic healing and alternative medicine. So we're super excited for you to listen to this episode as he talks to us about autoimmune disease as well as the integrative approach to healing that, especially when it comes to diet. And we dive a little deeper today into the plant-based diet as well. So we hope you enjoy this show. Stay tuned, and here we go. All right, so here we are with our guest this week, Dr. Micah Yu, who is a rheumatologist in California, but with special interest as well in lifestyle medicine, which I'll let him elaborate on. And he is joining us today so we can talk about autoimmune disease as well as lifestyle medicine and the interaction, correlation between the two. So welcome, Dr. Yu. Thanks for being on the show with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tim and May.
So why don't you, I always just ask our guests, because they do a better job than us butchering it, to just give our listeners a little bit of information about your background, your training, and how you got to where you are and your field.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm a rheumatologist by training. So I did 3 years of internal medicine residency and then 2 years of rheumatology fellowship at Loma Linda University. And I'm board certified in both internal medicine and rheumatology. And how I got to this point of becoming a rheumatologist really goes back to my days in high school, where I was first diagnosed with gout. And then over time, my disease, my arthritis, did transform to an arthritis that affected multiple joints, where different rheumatologists couldn't really diagnose me in the beginning, but eventually I did get diagnosed with spondyloarthritis, which is an autoimmune disease. It took many years. I would say much of my 20s, I was searching for answers. But I did notice that there was some correlation with food, but couldn't pinpoint what it was. And of course, medicine didn't really teach me through my training that food matters. So I was offered various medications, immunomodulating medications for my autoimmune disease with spondyloarthritis, but I refused it because I didn't want to subject myself to medications, even though I do the same for my patients, because I thought maybe there was a way out. So I stumbled upon, lifestyle medicine with the luck of being at Loma Linda and my wife being in family medicine and having a lifestyle medicine training at the same time. So she introduced me to plant-based nutrition, whole food plant-based diet, which I did give it a shot in May of 2018. And within 3 months, all my joint pain went away. And I was suffering for over 10 plus years of this pain that was very debilitating. I would limp to my ICU rotation for a whole month. I remember I would sometimes limp to clinic. I would wake up stiff, swollen, sometimes not being able to eat anything besides yogurt and water because my jaws would be so swollen. And this would happen throughout medical school through various various intense rotations. But I thought that being in my 20s, that my 30s was going to be the end of it, that I was going to be in crutches by then. But here I am, 36 today, pretty much pain-free, unless I eat something very processed and unhealthy. I'm pretty much pain free, not on any medications. Take some supplements sometimes, but I watch my lifestyle as much as I can and the food I put in. So that really led me into a journey of finding and making a mission for myself on finding what else can I do for my patients besides medications. So right now, currently, I am at the University of Arizona Integrative Medicine Fellowship with Dr. Andrew Weil in my last couple months of the program. Finish up my functional medicine training as well through the Institute of Functional Medicine. And me and my wife, we did form a private practice clinic in California December of 2020, where we focused on lifestyle medicine and rheumatology and family medicine. So yes, I do still give medications to my patients, but my goal is to balance it out or provide a way out of the medications.
Well. I'm just popping with questions now. First of all, that is spectacular that you found that. I mean, that is, I love success stories. And like I'd have patients come in and they'd say they did X, Y, and Z, and, you know, it wasn't necessarily what the, you know, standard allopathic medicine formula was. And I said, you know what? I don't argue with success. I said, if it's working for you and it's not illegal or immoral, I don't care what you do. I care that it works. So that is awesome. Now, can you tell us more specifically, because, you know, there's plant-based diets, which can be unbelievably processed, like some of the vegan stuff, you know, with, you know, you want tofurkey or whatever, and it's all, you know, gluten and artificial this and that, but it doesn't have any animal products in it. And then there's plant-based diets where you are eating like out of a garden, which is as close to the source as possible. So can you go into some specifics exactly, kind of what your diet looks like and how long it took before you really noticed, like, holy cow, this is the thing?
Yeah. So I would say in the very beginning when I did it, I was pretty strict with my diet. I was because I was pretty desperate. I was in so much pain. So when I first started this, I think something I ate a lot was this miso soup with tofu and green onions and mushrooms. I was eating that a lot in the beginning, but I would eat other foods, of course. I was eating a lot of salads, a lot of smoothies, a lot of just whole foods in general, a lot of fruits and vegetables was part of my diet. I would eat beans, various things. I mean, I think I was eating a little bit of processed food, but I was pretty good with my diet. But now I think I'm eating a bit more processed food. I still eat, you know, tofu. I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat a lot of fruits. I still have chickpeas, hummus, beans, and those sorts of foods. I don't eat any red meat or chicken at all. I do eat fish from time to time, but that's not something I eat at home. It's more like when I'm out and it's food on the table with a family, I'll eat every now and then. So I'm not vegan, but certainly I do try to opt for whole foods as much as possible. So lots of greens, whether it's cooked vegetables, raw vegetables, and lots of fruits. That's the staple of my diet. I am not gluten free. Certain gluten foods are healthy, but I try to stay away from the processed gluten foods as much as I can.
So I'm just thinking when you're telling your story, and you know, like Tim asked, sort of how you started to experiment. I think back to internship and residency. I think we all, I mean, not to diminish what you're going through, but it's just a horrible time in general, right? Because we're all sleep deprived, and you know that climbing. When you said ICU rotation, it just made me think that was my very first rotation as an intern. I felt like I got thrown into a vat of fire because right out of med school, and I was on call the first night, and there was 3 codes, and it was just, you know, the nurses held my hand and walked me through it, and I felt horrible and stressed, and cortisol's going crazy, and so internship and residency is a tough time anyway because of all those other factors. I just can slightly empathize with you.
Yeah, it doesn't help the
The whole thing,
situation
right?
with
Right,
the ICU rotation, but
right.
they'll
But
just recommend.
obviously, you know, you've got this condition then, which is just expanding things. So, um, did you at that point, I mean, did you take any time off, or did you kind of get your way through it?
Yeah,
And
I didn't take any time off. I think probably took like 2 days off the whole time of residency because of this condition. But otherwise, I, I mean, I, I didn't want to take any days off. Days that hurt, I just went through the day and just sucked it up.
wow,
That's what we're taught to do in medicine, right?
you're right.
just, just
Absolutely.
go through it, take criticism, and not talk back. I mean, that's the culture of medicine. But I think for me, yeah, I mean, I was told by one of my good friends now who is my attending. He was a rheumatologist. He ultrasounded me on my foot one day, and he saw that there was swelling there on me around the tendon and stuff. He's like, you should lay off of it, maybe not go to work. He gave me a he gave me a off work slip, but then I didn't really I took one day off. Um, that's how much I went through during residency. But I mean, here I am, thriving, despite being off medications and talking to you guys. So, I mean, my diet, I think whole foods diet is really important. I think plant-based diet can be, at least a whole food plant-based diet can be pretty powerful. My main message in my clinic is to pretty much eat less meat, eat more vegetables and fruits, but anything along the lines of a Mediterranean diet or greater is already good enough for me already.
So, as a rheumatologist, and having this personal background and story that got you there and interested in rheumatology, um, can you elaborate for our audience and us on why you think the plant-based diet is so effective for your condition, and do you think it's good for all autoimmune conditions, and
Mhm.
the physiologic reasoning for that?
Yeah, so I one of the reasons why whole food plant-based diet um can help is because most of your immune system is located at the gut, about 60 to 70% of it. And the way I explain it to my patients is that, all the food that you eat does pass through the lumen of the gut, and those foods do interact with your immune system. And from a like more science physiologic standpoint, is that you have T cells. I mean, this is just the basic part of the physiology, but you have T cells as part of your immune system, and you have something called a subset called T regulatory cells, and then you have inflammatory T cells such as T helper 17 cells. And when you eat fiber and micronutrients called phytonutrients in the different colors of the rainbow in fruits and vegetables, these nutrients and fiber can send anti-inflammatory signals through the immune system, through the T regulatory cells. When you increase T regulatory cells, it is anti-inflammatory, and the science and lots of scientific articles have shown that when you eat fiber and phytonutrients, it increases T regulatory cells, which then can sort of balance out back the immune system. Um, in a lot of autoimmune diseases and in rheumatology, T regulatory cells are sort of depleted and are um, down regulated, and T helper 17 cells are increased, which are your inflammatory T cells. So when you eat, so just to summarize, when you eat fiber and phytonutrients from these fruits and vegetables, it increases your T regulatory cells and it downregulates your T helper 17 cells, which is anti-inflammatory to sum up.
Has there been any, like studies, retrospective analysis on this, where they do gut biopsies before and after, or something like that, where people, or they can show that this has happened more than in sort of anecdotal cases?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't think there has been any gut biopsies done. No retrospective or prospective studies on gut biopsies. There are certainly a lot of different review articles on this. I can't remember if there's any meta-analyses on this at this time. But I would say overall, if you look up PubMed, there is a lot of data to support this, the fiber and phytonutrients being so effective on the gut microbiome and through the role it plays on T cells. Is a whole food plant-based diet the only way to eat for autoimmune disease? I would certainly say that's not the only way. If you look in the literature, um, of course, there's a paleo diet, autoimmune protocol diet that's very, very popular as well. There's a lot of data for the Mediterranean diet being anti-inflammatory. And those are some of the more popular anti-inflammatory diets out there. And the common foundation between the Mediterranean diet, a whole food plant-based diet, and a paleo diet is that they're all rich in plants. Okay, there are nuances in all of them. I mean, paleo diet, they favor grass-fed meat, organic meat, and they cut out a lot of the legumes and the nightshades. And the Mediterranean diet is high in fruits and vegetables, but they're very minimal in meat. But they also eat grains as well. And the paleo diet cuts out grains. So there's nuances between all of them. There's differences, but a foundation to all of them is high in vegetables and plants and fruits.
So the question I've always had, and one of the things we've said numerous times on our podcast is there's nothing more culty in the world than diet. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like you can pull somebody out of a cult and deprogram them easier than when people get into a certain diet. It's people identify themselves as the diet. What are you? I'm keto. No,
Yeah.
well, no, you're not. That's just how
Yeah.
you eat.
Yeah.
And I just find it really, really fascinating. I mean, it makes sense. It's something that we do, multiple times a day. It's incredibly onerous, some of these diets. I mean, especially where you eliminate basically everything. So it's nice to hear that, it's not like this way or no way, because I think that there's lots of ways to the same path. The question I've always had with regards to diet, especially with regards to weight loss, is, it's the $1 billion question, right? Like, is it what you eat that matters most, or is it how much you eat? I mean, because there was a guy from, I forget which university, who was eating 22 to 2,400 calories a day. He cut it back to 1,800 calories, ate nothing but 1,800 calories of Twinkies and Ho-Hos, and lost like 25 pounds. So, and he was sort of throwing water on the Gary Taubes stuff about how it's the quality of what your calories are, not, where he's like, no, it's just calories.
Mm-hmm.
And so, did you lose weight on this diet? Did it change your body? Because part of me always wonders if it's just catabolism or autophagy, where you're just like consuming yourself, if that isn't a super anti-inflammatory sort of anti-aging thing to go through, where the normal American eats so many times a day, and usually it's really highly processed and highly sugared. So you're always in this hyperdrive mode, and that, really when you spark autophagy, maybe that's really the key to the kingdom here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think within a span of a year, I lost about 30 pounds. So I lost weight at this time as well. So, weight loss wasn't my goal. I didn't realize actually how overweight I was until I actually lost the weight, until I saw the pictures of the before and after. I was like, wow, I was overweight and I never realized it. I think my BMI was, I mean, I wasn't obese. My BMI was like probably 26, 27, which is in the overweight category. My BMI is now like 23, 22, which is more normal. And I feel that's the best I've ever felt over the past like 20 years. I always tell people that, I feel better than I did, and I look better than I did than I was in high school. I probably weigh less than I did in high school. Yeah, in high school I was like 160. I'm like 130 now. So I'm back to probably my junior high weight.
Well, I hope you kept some of your junior high t-shirts. Tim kept those till, I don't know, 25 years into our marriage, and finally I'm like, dude, it's time to let these go. Even though you could fit in them.
I still have some that I can fit in because they're oversized t-shirts I used to sleep in.
Classic band ones, I hope. Something really cool, right?
Yes, classic school ones.
There you go. So
Mhm.
what I was going to say, to piggyback on to, what Tim was saying, and I really want to get in, because we've been doing a bunch of sessions on lifestyle this year. we started with a trainer earlier this year, counting macros and then looking at diet. And I really personally, I mean, I have an autoimmune condition, which we can maybe get into in a little bit, but diet has been a big part in my life over the last, especially 10 years, because I notice that gluten triggers my
Mm-hmm.
autoimmune flares for
Mm-hmm.
me. And there is gluten intolerance in our family severely. So there's that. So we've been experimenting this last year. We've talked to different people about plant-based diet, just healthy foods in general. And, we are about to step off the curb and get into the carnivore diet thing here in the next couple of weeks. But I've
Mm-hmm.
been pushing my diet a little more to heavy meat, more
Mm-hmm.
carnivore and
Mm-hmm.
less plants, and really being very picky about which plants I eat, and notice a massive change. And so I know I'm going to just ask you, what do you think of the people? There's some, Paul Saladino and Carnivore
Mm-hmm.
MD and Anthony Chaffee and a few others who their theory that carnivore diet works and they feel better. And of course it's anecdotal because it's them, but people with autoimmune conditions do better on a carnivore meat-based diet because of the thought process that a lot of plants, I'm not going to say are trying to kill you, but plants do have some things in them, especially with the seeds, because they're trying to prevent predators from eating them and spreading them around so that they can live, is the gist of it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I know of Paul Saladino through social media.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, there's I think they say that the plants have a lot of anti-nutrients as well and
right.
stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, with the carnivore diet, I think first of all you're cutting out a lot of the processed food, and the processed meat. So I think that's one of them because I think on a carnivore diet you're eating. Are you eating a lot of grass-fed meat? Do they allow for
Yeah.
regular?
Right. Well, so
Well,
I personally am. We've totally switched to where we're getting our stuff from, and we're buying grass-fed beef, as well as chickens. I think that they hand feed, where we rarely eat it now. We get it from this
Mm-hmm.
exclusive place in California. But yes, that's the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, is that we've totally changed the quality of the meat that we eat, and so that's my question, I guess. Is it really? What do you think? Do you think it's that it's the quality of the food more than the type of food?
Yeah, I think the quality. I think everyone's physiology is different. First of all, everyone's gut microbiome is different. That's why you see so many different diets that are so much. There's so much information about diets and different diets on the internet. Like this helped my autoimmune disease, and another person this helped my autoimmune disease.
Right.
So I think that stems from the fact that everyone's gut microbiome is different. Um, and everyone has different food sensitivities. So if your gut microbiome or my gut microbiome can't tolerate certain foods, I won't be able to tolerate a certain diet. With a carnivore diet, so people have improved on paleo diets as well. They have eaten meat, and the quality of meat I think is very important when it comes to that. Okay,
Hmm.
so I think the carnivore diet can potentially work, and one of the reasons why is cuts out a lot of the processed food, a lot of refined sugars, and also grains can sometimes pose an issue for patients in the autoimmune disease world, which is why the paleo diet sometimes more popular because the paleo diet cuts out grains. So, what is it about the grains? I mean, first of all, the gluten can be an issue for a lot of patients, but is there other things of the grains that are posing an issue that might be triggering flares? That's a possibility as well. So, that's why there's no one diet fits all. That's all. I always say that I encourage plants because there's a lot of data behind it, about the fiber and phytonutrients. But overall, a carnivore diet. My question is, on the long run, how will it affect the heart and heart disease? Because the American Heart Association does encourage more plants too. At least there's a lot of data behind the Mediterranean diet.
if
Right.
there's an organization and it has three letters in it and it has anything to do with the government, I don't believe them anymore.
Yeah. we're so
I'm
jaded.
waiting. I'm
You're
waiting
just
for them
freshly...
to kick my door down and take my passport. So,
Yeah. So Mike is just starting out, and I'd like to interview him again if we're around in
yeah,
30 years,
yeah,
just to see where he's at with
you know
his thoughts on
how.
regulation. But anyway,
Yeah, no,
that's not
it's
where we're going today.
Yeah.
no, not at all. No, but I think that this is. I think that this. I mean, I love this discussion because it's been one of my biggest frustrations in the last 2 years, which is two things can be correct at the same time. And actually, that's how life is. I mean, May and I have been married for 30 years, and our marriage is way better and way simpler to maintain now than it was 30 years ago. But it didn't happen by accident. And so, you will have hard times in a relationship. That's true. But you can make your relationship better. That's true. We know that. Okay. Somebody can do really well on a certain kind of limited diet, like keto. I think keto for people with metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetics, I think is magic. Would I want to go on keto? Do I need to do that? Probably not. Does, so I think that there's a tremendous amount of nuance in there. Plus the other thing, and you hinted at this, is sustainability. Like if you're eating nothing but half an elk a year, most people are not going to be able to sustain that. And if you had access to limitless elk meat, it would be great. I mean, it's unprocessed, it's wild, it's the most protein dense red meat there is, so, but not everyone is, Joe Rogan or Ted Nugent. And so, we still have to go to the grocery store, and we have to afford this too. I mean, we ramped up our protein, we increased the quality of the food we ate, and we're picky and we still want to eat stuff that tastes good, and it's not cheap.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, whether when you go whole food plant-based, some people want to opt for organic, or some people eat lots of fruits and vegetables, or if you go carnivore, the quality of meat, you can have good quality and bad quality, and sometimes that gets expensive, and not everyone has affordability on that, accessibility too.
Right. Plus, to get I totally believe in the micronutrients are super important, which, the plants provide that, and as well as the fiber, like you talked about. And so I'm thinking, how realistic? Yeah, if someone is full carnivore and then they have to eat these organ meats in order to get certain phytonutrients and micronutrients. I mean, is that realistic? Unless you're an Eskimo or an Inuit. I mean, is even your body really adapted to that genetically to deal with that? So, which brings me around to the question then on your thoughts on, I don't even know what the name of the diet, if it's called a diet, but eating based on your ethnicity because of the genetic sort of code. Like if you're from the British Isles and you're used to more of a meat and potatoes type of diet versus if you're from parts of Asia, where you're used to more lentils, beans, certain vegetables, you can tolerate, say, nightshades versus if you're like a North American Indian. What are your thoughts on, I don't know even if there's a name for it, but it's kind of more an ethnic based type of diet? I mean, should you be pushing a Mediterranean diet if you're not Mediterranean? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know about whether whether it's wrong to push other diets on different cultures. I mean, I understand that everyone has different gut microbiomes. When I see my patients, I take their culture into consideration. I do give certain recommendations, but I try to, try not to. You don't have to let go of your culture. You just try to make it healthier. That's what I tell my patients. And I give them examples. Okay, so here's like a Mediterranean diet. That's what it looks like, but you can adapt it to your ethnicity and your culture. I mean, some patients, they can get better by eating other foods from other cultures. I don't think they need to just stick to their own culture, but I think it helps them adapt to eating healthier when you take their culture into consideration and their ethnicity.
Yeah. So the gut microbiome is a huge thing we're interested in as well. And we actually had on our podcast, Dr. Sabine Hazen from California that is well known in fecal transplant, and
Mm-hmm.
her research in gut health, the microbiome, and autoimmune conditions as well. It's not even just autoimmune, but autism to Alzheimer's, et cetera, is really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating us. So, do you ever, can you lead us down the path? When a patient comes to you for their autoimmune issues, do you do any gut microbiome testing, stool testing, or what do you do as far as kind of looking into treatment options holistically? Do you do allergy testing? What's your approach?
Yeah, so I don't do food sensitivity testings in the beginning. That's more of a last resort because that can be sometimes inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the gut microbiome testing, I don't do that as a first visit either, unless a patient really asks for it. Because a lot of my autoimmune patients already have gut dysbiosis already. I know that. So I don't test that right away. What I look for is environmental toxins. I do look at environmental testing. So BPA, glyphosate. I look at VOCs, PBCs, all these different environmental toxins you can test for through these integrative lab companies. I test for heavy metals. I test for mold. Um, so I look at these different things to see whether they're really high in some of these patients because there are case reports out there of heavy metals contributing to autoimmune disease. Environmental toxins, there's so much data on that. They're known as endocrine disruptors. There's even data for them as immune dysregulators already. And they affect so many things. So for RA and lupus patients, there are studies out there that show that they are patients are at higher risk of getting these diseases if they've ever been indirectly exposed to pesticides, and it's even worse if you're directly exposed. Um, and there's more and more data. I think we're at the very beginning of environmental medicine studies. And I think that in the future, in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to see even more evidence that these environmental toxins plays a big role into that manifestation of our diseases. So it's not just diet. It goes beyond that. It's the environment and the toxins, heavy metals, the water source, um, and like BPA, all these things, different things are so important that we're not talking about these days. We don't get taught any of this in medicine. So I do look at environmental toxins first, and then later on, I do look at gut testing if it's necessary. But if patients are better by then I don't really need to go down that path because these tests get very, very expensive. They're at least $200 to $300 a test. That's why when you go to the functional medicine clinic, you hear how much patients have spent. They spent thousands of dollars coming out of that clinic, and sometimes they don't leave with the result that they want, but they have all these tests. So sometimes patients come to me and they have all these like
Yeah.
20 10 tests, 20 tests already that they've done, and sometimes some of these tests I don't really have a use for.
So if you find heavy metals, what do you do? Is that chelation then?
Yeah, chelation, detoxification. So detox, I think, is very, very important. That's what naturopaths do. Functional integrative medicine docs, sometimes they do that as well. So there are different forms of chelation. There you have, I think, it's DMSO, EDTA. I don't do these in my clinic. I use something called zeolite, which is like more from a rock, and that can help detox heavy metal sometimes too. So there's many, many different ways to detox. So that's the fun part and frustrating part of integrative and functional medicine is that there's no one algorithm out there. So I always tell my friends and colleagues that this is probably harder than doing an actual internal medicine or rheumatology fellowship because really there's so many trains of thoughts out there. There's no one medication or supplement out there to fix these different issues, and you don't have robust studies like you do in medicine because you don't have pharma backing up all these studies. So I think it's a vast big world out there that can have different ways of healing patients, and there's no one algorithm. So in a way, I feel like I'm teaching myself most of the time, even though I'm going to all these different conferences.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, so in the last even in our career in life, when we first started, the autoimmune field and rheumatology was such a small special. There wasn't really much to do in rheumatology. It's like, you go there and they'll say, well, we just put you on steroids and methotrexate or steroids and
right.
hydroxychloroquine. That's all we got, and it treats everything. And there's not much to research. And now, I don't know, over the last, like I said, 25, 30 years, it's just exploded from everything from celiac stuff. I mean, it used to be there. I remember one person on the ward ever that had celiac sprue, and it was like a big write up. Now, they've got the whole spectrum of gluten intolerance, supposedly, autoimmune things, lupus and RA exploding. And so there's got to be a correlation in, something we've been doing in the last 50 years that's changing our life. Is it the food? We did a show and talked about vaccines and how that could be altering kids' immune systems with what we're pumping through them.
Of course,
at
the
a young
goal
age.
of a vaccine is to alter your immune system.
There you go.
But you
toxins, chemicals that we're using. You said pesticides, and I think of myself out there with the Roundup, like last week, trying to kill these weeds and probably inhaling a bunch of it.
You grew up in a town with a massive smelter and lakes all around the smelter that you got water from.
I know. So, absolutely. With an explosion of autoimmune diseases over the last, even through our career, I think it's really great that we're starting to look at, what's the root causes and going from there and testing. But you're right. There's going to be there's no studies, and there's going to be a whole smattering of Western, Eastern, alternative medicine approaches. So I guess I'm just kind of like, I don't even know where to ask. Like, if I was to walk into your clinic, you really just start with a battery of screening tests, like you said, kind of to look for things.
So, when a patient comes to my clinic, I do the traditional rheumatology workup first. That's what patients are usually coming to me for, or whatever autoimmune problem they're coming, I'm suspecting. So typical history and physical, I do just like any other doctor. But I do go over the lifestyle medicine factors. I talk about nutrition, what they're eating. I talk about stress. I talk about sleep. I talk about trauma, childhood trauma, abuse of any kind. And I also talk about environmental toxins as well, what they're exposed to, what they've been exposed to as a child. Did they grow up on a farm? Where they grew up? Did their parents divorce? And all these questions that I have for them that really matter, that, most doctors don't really think about. And from there, it depends on what direction my patients want to go down on. Are my patients open to alternative medicine, integrative medicine, or do they just want the medication from rheumatology and move on? Usually it's a mix of both. They want the integrative medicine aspect, but they also want the medications as well. So I do use biologics in my office. I do use like things like methotrexate, Plaquenil that you talked about. So I do use these traditional medications. But sometimes, if patients are more mild, they would probably want the alternative or integrative approach first, which I'm open to as well. I give supplements for that. I change their diet, work on their mental health aspect, and sometimes that does work right away. I've seen some patients, that get fixed with these diseases that were initially they were offered medications. So I'll give you an example. So I had one patient who has something called non-radiographic axial spondyloarthritis, which is pretty much ankylosing spondylitis, but you don't see many imaging features of it. They went to see another rheumatologist before they saw me. They were offered Humira, which is a biologic heavy-duty medication. And then they went to see me. I was like, let's just try more of a anti-inflammatory diet. So I offered a plant-based diet. They cut a lot of processed food. They still ate meat. And then within one visit, their back pain went away. They went back to playing golf and running. So I was very impressed that it happened in one visit. They got fixed. And they were able to avoid medications. I've done this a couple of times with other patients as well. So I go through, sometimes patients do it does work. They don't need any medications. Other people, they need both. Patients who have gone through the whole integrative route, multiple providers and doctors and naturopaths as well. And I'm putting them on biologics and they're still flaring. There's something there that's happening, and they have multiple doctors on board that are in an integrative, holistic world, and we still haven't figured it out. So not everyone will get fixed right away. There's no one right answer to fix all this. Yes, there are battery tests I can run, some of which I've mentioned already. Something does give us answers, sometimes it doesn't, and that's the beauty of, I would say, integrative medicine, and the frustrating part, which is why I got myself training in functional medicine and training in integrative medicine, because they all have something unique that they can provide to healing the patient. And I think allopathic medicine doesn't have all the answers, which you guys probably agree with as well, which is why you guys have this podcast. There's acupuncture, there's Chinese medicine, there's Reiki, there's Ayurveda. There's so much that can be done for patients, and sometimes patients just need to go down this rabbit hole, this journey, until they find the right answer for them.
Right, because again, it's the key to the kingdom is whatever works. Like like I've said a million times to patients, as long as it's not illegal or immoral, I don't care if you do it. If it works for you and you can afford it, do whatever works. I mean, that's all that matters. I mean, when I was younger, I was so much more committed to the fact that you didn't transgress, you didn't, get outside the party line, that anything else that was, had this alternative name or whatever was just, witchcraft or quackery. And of course that exists. But just like corruption in the pharmaceutical industry exists, and if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that medicine has been unbelievably top-down driven. It's like what you talked about medical training, and you're a recent grad, and how it really is authoritarian. It's not free thinking. I mean, doctors aren't engineers. We're much more. This is much more like the military than it is building rocket ships. And we are trained very early to do what you're told and do not step out of line, because that is very painful. And, so we've really gravitated to folks like you who are willing to think for themselves, who are willing to go, yeah, of course, allopathic medicine has tons to offer. I mean, if I got Hodgkin's lymphoma, would I take chemo? Of course. I mean, otherwise you're dead in 6 months. And, I have a friend that's got Hodgkin's in 1986 and he's just doing fine. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we need that. But we also need, you know what? Maybe you should stop eating the Cheetos and go for a walk once in a while,
Yeah, back to the principles, basic principles. I mean, medicine is, like I agree with you. It's authoritarian. Don't respect your seniors, respect your attendings, and do what they say. And in medicine, we've been taught that, allopathic medicine is the best. It's the right answer. It's the only answer, and everything else, it's sort of woo-woo. But that's not the case. And as people get fixed more and more outside of traditional medicine, it's going to be more prevalent. But luckily, medicine is starting to open up a little bit, like some of our guidelines in rheumatology, at least for osteoarthritis. So we do have acupuncture on there. We do have other things that are, alternative medicine, but, it's still not mainstream thought yet. And I think we're far from it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, I think it does. I think all of this, the sun with which this stuff orbits is unfortunately money. I mean, it's always it's always, well, can we patent whatever we're doing and produce it into a bottle and then sell it 100 billion times and see what happens, and in some respects, and especially 100 years ago, that served medicine quite well. I mean, it really did. I mean, it got us a bunch of antibiotics. It got us a bunch of vaccines that I think are, really great. I think it's probably a good idea to get a tetanus vaccination, since tetanus lives in dirt, and we, in the name of the planet we live on, is Earth. So, but But just because something works for a while and is a really good idea doesn't mean that you need to do it 9 billion times, and, are we suffering this spike in autism and autoimmune diseases and, neurodegenerative diseases because of antibiotics? Is antibiotics part of the problem? I would contend yes. Are vaccines part of the problem? I would contend yes. Are pesticides part of the problem? Of course. Or environment. I mean, it's all of the above. I mean, it's the blessing and the curse. The blessing of antibiotics is that you don't die of pneumonia. It's an inconvenience that can be treated for most patients, even in their 80s and 90s, in an urgent care. When William Osler really basically invented modern medicine 100 years ago, he called pneumonia the captain of the man of death. It was what killed everybody. And so, the good is you don't die of pneumonia. The bad is, well, what else is going on here? I mean, it's a trade-off. I would take the 2022 trade-off compared to the 1922 trade-off, but it's still a trade-off, and we still need to acknowledge that.
Right. I completely agree with you. I think this explosion of just not autoimmune disease, just diseases in general, thyroid, diabetes, all these different diseases, and heart disease too. It's a culmination of everything we've done. But because I'm specializing in rheumatology and autoimmune disease, I'll circle back to that. Like for you talk about antibiotics, there are data now that JIA or juvenile idiopathic arthritis, there is connected to antibiotics. It's a higher risk when kids take antibiotics. With JIA, we talked about pesticides already. Vaccines. I mean, there are vaccine-induced injuries. It's, it's not something that's not widely accepted in the medical community, but there are, at least as far as the autoimmune disease world, there are case reports out there that patients can get vasculitis, they can get various autoimmune diseases after a vaccine. And it's unfortunately it's not very widely accepted or talked about as well. There's an Asia syndrome. I forgot what the Asia syndrome stands for anymore, but it talks about how vaccines and different adjuvants in there are connected to different injuries in autoimmune disease. So yeah, it's everything we've done. There's technology has benefited us, the industrial revolution and modern medicine, but at the same time, there are consequences. There's risks and benefits all the time to these things.
Right. So I'm just thinking of our listeners, and I know that, of course, they'll be probably just jumping with questions of things that we didn't ask. But since you're in rheumatology, is there a predominant class of illness that you're seeing these days, or is it biased because of who selects to come see you? But I mean, are you seeing mostly lupus things now, RA, juvenile RA? Is there how would you categorize the most kind of prominent or common thing that you're seeing in rheumatology?
Yeah, so great question. I do see a lot of rheumatoid arthritis in my clinic, psoriatic arthritis as well. Lupus is up there also. In rheumatology, we see myositis also. So I do have some patients with myositis in my clinic. So that myositis is an autoimmune disease attack of the muscles. So these patients sometimes can't. I mean, in the worst case scenario, they're bedbound because their muscles are so inflamed. And yeah, there is an explosion of these autoimmune diseases. I think there was a paper in the International Journal of Celiac Disease that showed that there's about a 7% to 10% rise of these autoimmune diseases every year now. And that's across all systems: GI, neuro, rheumatology, neuro, including multiple sclerosis. So it's really unfortunate.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Time out. 7 to 10% a year? Like
Yeah.
if my portfolio got that, I would pee my pants. I would be so happy.
Yeah, I think that's
Wow.
globally too. So 7%, at least 7%. So yeah, it's going up, and it's it's a consequence of everything that we've talked about so far and that you mentioned, with the antibiotics, I think the pesticides, all the environmental toxins, the food. I mean, there's more processed food. The gluten in America is not as good as the ones in Europe. And gluten, can be a potential another issue as well. So all these different things, unfortunately, have caused us to be where we are today.
But it is really interesting because, again, everything is a trade-off.
Yeah.
And so, 120 years ago, the turn of the last century, in 1900, 30% of all deaths were children, because children are born immune naive. There was no antibiotics, and mostly the sanitation was terrible. And, so you don't have water treatment plants. You have cholera epidemics in cities like Memphis every single year that wipes out little kids. Okay. So we get, sewage treatment, water treatment plants. That's, in my opinion, the greatest piece of medical technology in the history of the world. And just look around in the world that doesn't have this, and you'll see where people die of pestilence every year. And then, processed food changed the world. I mean, it saved countless people's lives because food storage and the ability to get quick meals and sustain your ability to go back to the factory or back to the farm was massive. So there was actually benefit initially in processed food. I don't think there's any question of that. The problem is now, like, if you would have told somebody in 1922 that the single biggest killer of Americans is going to be they're too fat, they would have gone, how is that possible? I mean, people are starving to death in New York City. How is it that they're choking on their own fat? And the answer is, well, we're a victim of our own success, economically and technologically. I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah. These ultra processed foods, they affect our hormones, they affect our immune system. They're just not calories. And with you mentioned weight loss in the beginning of the show, weight loss is there's something called obesogens in environmental toxins, and that plays a role in a weight fluctuation. That is not recognized at all in medicine. So it goes beyond calories. But yeah, these processed food, they have helped us over the years. I think they're important to have, but not as a day-to-day food. We need to go back to the basics. They're there when we need something like a quick bite, but that's not everyday thing. I think if we stop using these foods on a day-to-day basis, you wouldn't see such an explosion of these diseases. And they're more for, like, I would say, emergency use. But unfortunately, the way society is, people are stressed out. People are commuting to work. They don't have time. People are multitasking, doing 10 different things. So it's the way our society works these days, unfortunately, and we need to go back to the basics.
I was thinking of the emergency rations, just like you said, that lasted 3 years. My dad was a pilot, and he had this emergency ration kit that literally checked every 3 years the food, the spam, the dry, dehydrated food would last, and it's meant to be an emergency and not your staple. So
and then you crash and you hike through the woods in northern Canada with your K ration and wonder why it attracted a bear. So
so what have you been seeing with COVID, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit with us since COVID, as far as autoimmune disease, COVID vaccine or COVID illness causing things?
You had to pick the scab, didn't you?
I had to, because I know people are going to ask. And
great questions. Tough questions. So I was, in the beginning of the pandemic, I was still in fellowship. I was in rheumatology. So we were actually called upon the university to be part of the well, at least my fellowship, we were part of the, actually, just scratch it. Let's start over again. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I was still part of my rheumatology fellowship, and we were dealing with the cytokine storm. A lot of people have heard of the cytokine storm with COVID. So cytokine storm is something that doesn't happen in COVID. It can happen to a number of different diseases, especially in rheumatology. So these patients, their immune system just goes haywire. And that can happen in disease such as adult onset Still's disease. And there's certain labs that go haywire too. So we were in rheumatology, since we're sort of the immunologist in medicine, along with allergists, we were called upon to monitor these patients for a cytokine storm. I was in the thick of it. We were giving Plaquenil at the beginning, very beginning, before we said it didn't work nationally. We were giving different medications. And then after my fellowship finished, I was still dealing with COVID because I was moonlighting as a nocturnist. So I still was dealing
Oh,
with COVID.
wow.
So yeah, I mean, there were patients young and old that were coming with COVID. More older, more overweight people were at risk, but certainly the young were not spared, even if they were 30, 20 and fit. But from the rheumatology side in my clinic, I mean, I've seen the vaccine sometimes give problems, and also the COVID virus also give problems. So COVID virus, inside and outside the hospital, we have seen, or at least I have seen, autoimmune disease issues, whether it be arthritis, lupus, labs going sort of haywire when patient never has these kinds of issues come up from the actual COVID virus. As far as vaccine, I've seen one patient with 1 week after the Moderna vaccine get an autoimmune disease that I only read in textbooks. I'd never seen it in person because it's so rare, called eosinophilic fasciitis.
Mm.
Sometimes I've seen patients 2 weeks or a couple weeks out from the vaccine start having joint pain and that have persisted. And sometimes their labs are negative, but there's there's something going on there, but you just can't pinpoint it. So I've seen various things happen to my patients: brain fog, chronic fatigue from the virus and from the vaccine as well. So the virus isn't the only culprit that I've seen. The vaccine has done these things too, but of course it's not. I don't think it's still widely talked about. Maybe only amongst patients with these symptoms, but I haven't been following on mainstream media lately, so I don't know if mainstream media has been talking about any of these things.
Well, certain groups that we are part of, that there's certain physician groups, and yeah, it almost is like underground to begin with, where they do talk on problems with the illness, the vaccine, people, what we're seeing, reports from um, the medical community that are working with patients, like you are, not just sort of
Mhm.
in lab or academic centers and not really seeing frontline patients. There's a lot of reports of various things like that. But you're right, a lot of that information just gets squashed from mainstream media, and you can't even post about it without being taken down in a false narrative. So no, I mean, that's
Mhm.
I get it. That's helpful to share that
Yeah.
you're seeing that too. And
Yeah,
sadly,
but the problem with this that just drives me crazy. I mean, the censorship part is just insane.
yeah.
Like, even if somebody's crazy, I mean, unless unless they're breaking the law, making a threat, they're libelous or whatever. If you're trying to make an argument and someone is crazy and making a counter argument, you turn their argument up. You don't turn it down,
Mhm.
because they're obviously crazy and it obviously supports your side. The,
Mhm.
the censorship of guys that are like total studs, like Harvey Risch and Peter McCullough, Malone, et cetera. These guys were not. I mean, these guys were. I mean, Malone was a total insider. I mean, he worked in
Mhm.
biodefense forever, so he was
Mhm.
in this stuff from the very beginning.
Oh, even Pierre Corey, what he's
Yeah,
seeing in the
I mean,
hospital.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's the it's the censorship part, and it doesn't mean it. It doesn't mean that these guys are like 100% correct, but there needs to be a healthy debate. That's science, and
Yeah,
and,
I
and
agree
that's
with you.
always just been what really drove me crazy. But it's common sense. If COVID can cause autoimmune reactions, which makes sense, there's tons of autoimmune diseases that are triggered by viruses, then
Mhm.
of course the vaccine could potentially do that. How couldn't it? You're getting only the spike protein. They're giving you an intramuscular injection of the most inflammatory part of the virus. Like,
Mhm.
you don't think that might cause a problem potentially? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know. I know it's very unfortunate that you can't even have a healthy debate these past couple years. I mean, I posted something on social media about, I don't remember what I talked about. It was something about oh yeah, vaccines can also give problems sometimes for autoimmune diseases. Just general. I didn't even say COVID. I said vaccines in
Right.
general. There's a lot of case reports out there. And I got shut down immediately by different people. So it wasn't even COVID. So I mean, talking about COVID, it would have been like shutting down my social media probably. So
Oh
um,
yeah.
it's really, I mean,
Yeah.
that's yeah, like you said, that's the point of science is to have a healthy debate, and people can't even have a healthy debate these days about anything, not even outside of medicine. People get
I know.
offended so easily. So it's unfortunate where our culture and society has come to, because
Yeah,
that's how science grows. That's how medicine grows. Is to have a debate, is to explore what the possibilities are out there.
absolutely. That's how
Yeah.
we progress and find
Hmm.
new treatments and theories, etc.
Well,
Hmm.
that's how our relationship grew because we debated and learned how to negotiate everything. I mean, that's just normal human interaction. I mean, if
Hmm.
what so you're born and you're 100% correct until you're dead. I mean, like, come on, give me a break. I mean, how do you
Right.
learn?
And yeah, and then patients are getting gaslighted, by the
Oh,
doctors, by all these different people, because they haven't explored the possibilities. They probably don't, or they don't read up on any literature at all, and they just go with the mainstream media.
yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So, speaking of media, why don't you share for us, because I know that you're on social media and have
Mhm.
nice platform there, where people can find you, and also um, if people want to see you as a rheumatologist, um, can they? Do you treat people outside of the state of California, and how does that work?
Yeah. So, just starting off, my social media is my autoimmune MD. That's MY autoimmune MD. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. I'll be starting my own podcast in the next couple months, so watch out for that. I'll be on all the possibilities with autoimmune diseases. So similar to what you guys are doing, but more focused on autoimmune disease. And then um, people can find me in my clinic in Newport Beach, California. My clinic is called Doctor Lifestyle, and the website is www.drlifestyle.org. That's drlifestyle.org. And I do see patients outside of California. I have 15 state licenses, so I see patients virtually throughout the U.S. I see patients in Canada and throughout the world. So I only have one continent that I haven't seen patients, and that is Antarctica.
No.
Yeah, so it's yeah, so I see patients all throughout the world, and you can find me all over social media. And my mission is to really find out what ways we can help with autoimmune disease, what the root causes are, and what are the other integrative modalities we can give to patients. Because medicine isn't the only way. There is so many different things that Eastern culture, Asian culture has been able to help with Ayurveda, with traditional Chinese medicine. So there's no one fix for everybody. So that's what my platform is all about.
Yeah, no, that's great. I loved one of the things I've discussed with tons of my friends is that you need to pay attention to ancient wisdom because if it
Mhm.
was ancient bullshit, it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be able to be ancient.
Exactly. Yeah. Just because we don't have thousands of randomized control trials of these modalities that these ancient cultures, that doesn't mean that it didn't work. It doesn't mean that they were stupid. There's a reason why they were able to find stuff that worked without all these technological advances that we have these today.
Yeah, I mean they only did it over a few thousand years,
I know they
right?
only wrote it in books multiple times.
Yeah, I mean it's
Exactly.
wild.
So, any parting last words of wisdom, advice, if you wanted to throw it out there to patients, um, to sort of sum up your platform, so to speak?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you're struggling with a disease, you haven't found any answers, or you have these symptoms that no one can pinpoint, I would encourage you to continue getting second, third, fourth, fifth opinions. There's gonna be a practitioner out there that can help you. So sometimes you have to explore naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, acupuncture, Ayurveda. There's so many ways of healing, and so just be your own advocate. Even though I was a doctor, I had to be my own advocate myself, or else I'll be on medications today.
Yeah,
And who knows what side effects I would have.
I think that's become a de
I
facto
love that.
theme in our last several interviews, almost for the whole year, which is, you have to be your own advocate, and because unfortunately, the system is not going to advocate at, be your advocate. So I think that's a
Hmm.
really great summation.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Dr. Yu, for joining us. I know our listeners are going to just love this episode, and I guess that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was really good. Again, I am stunned with the quality of people that we're meeting, especially the quality of people that we're meeting from, what we used to think, even 20 years ago or less, were kind of into, like, alternative medicine I thought was kind of quackery. And there's definitely some quackery, even in big health systems that got into alternative medicine because they saw it as a sort of cash cow, this integrative, cash-based healthcare. But man, these people are really well read. They're real doctors, in my opinion, because they're willing to see what works, see what doesn't work, abandon what doesn't work, and then fully embrace total health, not just medications, which is really, I think, the theme. That shouldn't be alternative. That is health. Health is how you live, and then you get sick, and then you might need a medication, not I need medications just to, maintain myself. That just, there's something about that just drives me crazy.
What I think is impressive, and I didn't really note in the intro to the show with him, but he explained pretty well at the beginning, is that it's impressive that he actually, he's doing another fellowship in wellness and functional medicine and integrative medicine, because he's gone through rheumatology and realized that, it's just not pills, pharmaceuticals, it's the whole person, and to be able to treat the patient fully in the way that he wants to, he is, doing his fellowship with Dr. Andrew Weil, and he is a very well-known person in the integrative medicine field. He's been, I don't know how old he is, I'd have to look it up, been around for a long time. So really impressive resume, and, a really cool backstory that's really impacted how he treats his patients, because he looks at the whole approach. So you can follow him on his social handles. Like he said, I will link. He's on Instagram. That's where I follow him. And that links to his website as well and all his resources. And if you've got any more questions, reach out to him. He would be happy to hear from you. He does, as you know, treat patients from all over. So unless you're in Antarctica, you might have the ability to contact him and just get another opinion. But I totally agree with what Tim's saying, that I think it's pretty cool how doctors, I think that there's a lot of a subset of docs that are looking at the whole person, and it's part of medicine. It is medicine. It's not alternative. So on that note, really interesting stuff, especially on the plant-based diet side of things. We have another cool episode coming your way in the next couple of weeks, focusing more on the meat side of the aisle. So I'm excited for that one. We'll see how crazy it gets, and if it seems to be as good or as a straw hat as I'm wondering.
That's called a tinfoil hat. Yeah, but it's been interesting, and what we're going to do is we are actually we have scheduled a physician who is into the carnivore diet, which we'll go into in detail, which is really mind blowing. Like when you talk carnivore, it is carnivore, and of note, Jordan Peterson, who was very ill, he almost died. I'm not exactly sure what he had, but he was treated with, he was actually had I believe like a dependency on benzodiazepines, which he managed to get off of everything. And part of how he did it is he ate nothing but meat, and he lost 50 pounds. I thought he was slim before, and he said it just absolutely revolutionized his life. The other thing he said is it's really, 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 really difficult.
Yeah.
But for him, it was like, I got to do something different. I've researched it. This is what I think is going to help me. It changed his life. It brought all of his vigor back. And, but he said, do not tread into this lightly, because it's difficult.
I'm, getting my own opinions as we go along this year with our own training, and we do our research, which we will bring to you in a wrap-up episode after all of this later on this year.
Yeah.
So for now, eat your veggies, get your micronutrients and fiber. Stay healthy, good colon health, and we'll see you next time.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.